The neighborhood pretended to be peaceful in a way only places with too many rules can. Lawns shaved to military fades. Driveways rinsed until they shone. Identical mailboxes standing at attention like little white soldiers stamped with the HOA's crest. Wind chimes tinkled with curated cheer above porches where plastic ferns were rotated according to a seasonal schedule printed in the community newsletter. And at the entrance a stone sign announced Maple Crest Estates in serif letters that suggested both money and warnings you couldn't quite read. Into that curated quiet rolled a slate gray SUV that made no noise beyond the polite thrum of an engine tuned for stealth. And behind the wheel sat Alicia Grant, dressed down in a soft black hoodie and gray jeans, her hair pulled into a practical twist that showed a face too calm to be ordinary, eyes that assessed without seeming to, hands that rested lightly on the steering wheel with a familiarity that had weathered night raids and hostage standoffs and morning briefings, where coffee steamed beside maps pocked with red pins. She had driven this route as a teenager before there was a stone sign, when the streets were still asphalt and stubborn dandelions, and she smiled despite herself at the memory of her aunt's laugh, big, unapologetic, flavored with cinnamon tea and church hymns. As she took the right turn toward Sycamore Lane, where a line of yellow tulips bobbed in the breeze like a row of cheerful jurors. She hadn't been home in months, not properly, not long enough to let sleep peel the tension from her shoulders, and she told herself that this weekend would be different. No case files, no encrypted emails, no tactical plan sketched on napkins, just her aunt's kitchen and a scratch skillet hissing onions, and the luxury of only one voice calling her name. Her aunt's text had been simple: "Come when you can. The spare key's still in the owl statue. I made that peach cobbler you like." And Alicia had laughed at the owl part because the HOA had forced her aunt to remove the real owl statue 5 years ago in favor of an approved ceramic owl from a catalog, as if authenticity itself were a violation. She eased a stop at the curb, checked a house number she could have found blindfolded, and breathed in the ordinary. A kid's bike abandoned on a patch of grass shaped by regulations, a sprinkler clicking like a metronome, the faraway shriek of a kettle in someone else's kitchen. She cut the engine, the quiet folding around her, and for a moment she simply sat with her hands at 10 and 2 and let her pulse settle. Then she reached into the center console for the small foil-wrapped container of cobbler her aunt had sent last month and insisted she return. "Bring it back, baby. I don't need all my Tupperware living at federal headquarters." And she smiled again, knowing she'd replaced the foil with a proper lid before she left this time. The badge and sidearm in her locked compartment stayed, where they were unseen, unnecessary for a family visit. But habit moved her eyes anyway. A quick scan. 2 teens in hoodies on a distant stoop debating a basketball. A couple in matching joggers power walking with the earnestness of people who had recently discovered heart health articles. And across the street a man with a dog who looked like a melted cereal marshmallow leash dragging his owner toward a fragrant bush. Nothing dangerous, nothing even interesting, until a white golf cart appeared from behind the magnolia trees near the clubhouse, humming like an insect with a mission. The word security stenciled on its side in Helvetica bold, as if a font could confer authority, and on the bench seat a broad-shouldered man in a tactical-looking vest pretended his steering wheel needed 2 hands. Alicia watched without moving, years of practice making observation a passive act. The vest read HOA Security, Operations, which was not a thing that existed, but sounded impressive. Enough to the kind of person who cared about sounding impressive. The man's head was shaved, his jawline prickled with afternoon stubble, his eyes a pale, impatient blue that scanned the street for deviations from a script only he had written. He slowed as he reached her, flicked his siren for the thrill of it, one half-hearted whoop like a toy clearing its throat, and parked the car at an angle that blocked no one, but suggested he enjoyed the idea that it could. He swung his boots onto the asphalt with a grunt and adjusted the vest like a movie extra waiting for the camera to find him, and Alicia, who had negotiated with men who wore real vests for real reasons, felt the first prickle of annoyance creep up her spine. She stepped out of her SUV, holding the foil container and her overnight bag, one hip nudging the car door closed with the ease of a woman who had carried heavier things under worse skies. And the man approached, hand open as if to stop traffic, voice already too loud for the distance between them. "Ma'am, can I help you?" The kind of question that wasn't a question at all. "I'm good, thanks," Alicia said, polite neutral. The final syllable edge would move along warmth, and she angled toward the walkway with ceramic owl watchroom's approved perch beside the azaleas. The man took 2 strides to cut her off, breathing the word ma'am again like he owned it, like it came with a vest. This is a private community, residents only, or guests with clearance. It's in the bylaws, he added in the way he said bylaws made it sound like a federal statute rather than a pamphlet that scolded about Christmas lights and trash can colors. I'm visiting family, Alicia replied, shifting the cobbler to her other hand. Grant residence, 2417 Sycamore, and she gestured toward the house where a wind chime shaped like silver spoons caught light between the porch posts. I know who lives here, the man said, narrowing those pale eyes as if focusing could force her into a different category. And I don't recall a visitor pass being logged for today. Then he angled his chin toward her SUV. And that vehicle is not registered with Maple Crest Estates, as though the SUV owed him a pledge of allegiance. Alicia, who spent mornings writing low-doubt manifests and afternoons deciding which door would be the safest breach, tasted the absurdity like metal on her tongue and kept her posture loose, the way you do when a situation doesn't yet deserve the energy of your spine. I texted my aunt, she said. She's expecting me. And she turned her head toward the kitchen window, as if her aunt might appear and wave, but the curtains remained a pale yellow pattern they had been since 2008, and the inside stayed the kind of quiet that made you remember you forgot to call first. The man's expression brightened at the lack of immediate proof like a fisherman feeling the line twitch, and he stepped closer, his breath tinged with coffee and something minty meant to disguise it. Name, he demanded. Full name, and Alicia gave it, no flinch, no fight. Alicia Grant, letting the syllables fall in a calm voice that had, on other days, diffused rooms that wanted to burn. Identification, he said, palm out now. And she thought briefly how odd it always felt be asked for ID when the most important thing she carried could end the conversation in 3 seconds, a rectangle of authority heavy enough to tilt men back on their heels. But she left it locked away because this was supposed to be a regular day. The sort of day where your aunt pulls open the door with flour on her cheek. And flashing a badge in your own hometown felt like bringing a tank to a picnic. I'm not required to show ID to an HOA. Attendant, she said, gentler than the words deserved, and my aunt will be out in a minute. But the man, Frank Doyle sewn in yellow thread above a patch that read Security Chief, shifted his stance to the kind cops use when they want you to remember gravity, thumb hooking near a holster that did not belong at the waist of a homeowners association official. Alicia noticed a holster the way a pianist recognizes middle C, instantly, irrevocably, cataloging its model, the cheap retention strap, the way his hand hovered too close, too eager. Neighbors had started to drift from their porches, drawn by the siren chirp and the sudden stillness of 2 bodies in a choreography as old as fear, a woman trying to get home and a man deciding the street was his. Phones appeared, hesitant at first, then bolder. Camera lenses drinking light. Look, Alicia said, letting a sliver of impatience finally texture her tone. I'm here to see my aunt, Ms. Lorraine Grant. She's lived here for 15 years. She serves on your gardening committee and bakes pies for the summer picnic. You can verify that in whatever binder you've got a headquarters. And she nodded toward the clubhouse beyond the maples, where a bulletin board displayed the sort of announcements that gave small power a place to stretch, but Frank, because that was his name, she saw it, and names matter, curled his lip in a smile that wasn't one. Ma'am, we've had reports of suspicious activity. He lied with the casual ease of someone who trusted a uniform to sand his edges. People casing houses, catalytic converters gone missing. We can't be too careful. And as he spoke, his right hand smoothed the Velcro on his vest, the nervous tick of a man gearing up for a performance he rehearsed in mirrors. Alicia held his gaze, letting the silence make him uncomfortable, and said finally, careful is good. Reckless is dangerous. Then she shifted half a step toward the path again, a small test of whether this was a conversation or a barricade. Frank moved faster than his bulk suggested, arms widening the block, commanding, stop right there. Voice ricocheting off mailbox posts, and something in the air changed, a trapped current feel. As the teens on the stoop went quiet, the joggers slowed, the man with the marshmallow dog tugged his leash away from the yellow tape that wasn't there but felt like it. Alicia's bag strap creaked on her shoulder, the only sound for a beat, and she understood, in that precise, mathematical way tactical training taught, that she had reached the edge of courtesy and the beginning of risk. She softened her stance further, palms open at her sides, nothing in them but a foil pan and a weekend's worth of clothes, and she told him the truth that should have ended it. "You're making a mistake," she said evenly, "and I am telling you that as your best lifeline today." But the words, offered as a bridge, sounded to Frank like a challenge, because some men only hear warnings as dares. He snorted, squaring his shoulders like a movie still, and said with relish, "You don't tell me how to do my job." And then, as if the day had been building toward this precise cliche, his hand went to his holster and pulled. The motion was too fast for the setting and too slow for Alicia's world. She watched it with trained mind that splits a second into chapters. The heel of his hand slapping plastic, the strap flapping, the muzzle clearing leather, the neighbor's gasp like a cork. Popping in a too-quiet room, her own muscles tightening in automatic readiness, even as she forced her hands higher to keep his lizard brain from finding an excuse to fire. The street shiver with sudden, electric stillness as the gun leveled at her chest from 6 feet away, and Alicia saw the tiny tremor in his wrist, the thrill of power crackling through him like static on a dry day, and she knew down to the thread count of her hoodie, that the man pointing a weapon at her had no idea who he was aiming at, no idea what line he had crossed or what weight would crash down on him when it became clear. Neighbors' phones glowed now, recording a chorus of red dots blinking witness. Someone whispered, "Call 911." And the joggers had already dialed. Alicia kept her hands up, her voice iron flat as a tranquil sea. "I am visiting family on this property. You are not law enforcement. Put the weapon away." And the simple geometry of the moment, the fake authority, the real gun, the crowd, turned the cul-de-sac into a stage where everything that had been simmering under those manicured lawns finally found match. Frank's grin spread, the ugly bloom of a man who believed the vest made him bigger than consequence, and he stepped closer, muzzle tracking her, barking, on the ground now, as if he'd seen it in a training video and liked the sound of it. And Alicia, who had spent a career kneeling only when it saved lives, weighed her options with microsecond precision and elected for the moment to give him a mercy of one last warning. "You are pointing a loaded weapon at a federal officer," she said, not shouting, not yet revealing, just setting the fuse near the powder he'd piled himself. And somewhere a wind chime twinkled like nervous laughter as the sky decided whether to darken or blaze. Frank's gun trembled slightly in his grip, but his voice grew louder to cover the shake, barking, "Don't play games with me. You're on private property, and I'll put you down if you don't obey." And the crowd gasped, phones lifting higher, some neighbors murmuring that this had gone too far, while others froze in horrified fascination. Alicia's gaze never left him, her breathing measured like she was back on a range, counting each inhale against the weight of his mistake. And she said evenly, "I've dealt with men who thought their vest made them untouchable. None of them were right." But Frank only sneered, waving the pistol closer, trying to humiliate her in front of the gathering. Audience shouting, "You think you're tough? Out here you're nothing, lady." And with that, the quiet dignity she'd carried since stepping out of her SUV hardened into resolve. Alicia slowly reached into her jacket with controlled precision, her every move deliberate, and when Frank barked, "Don't you dare," she ignored him, pulling out not a weapon but a slim black leather case. With a flick of her wrist, the badge flashed gold under the suburban sun, the letters catching every eye, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Tactical Commander, and the crowd erupted with gasps, some neighbors crying out, "Oh my God, she's FBI," while Frank's face drained of color, his grip faltering, a stutter escaping his lips. "And no, this has to be fake." But Alicia's tone was iron as she stepped forward, still holding the badge high. "Commander Alicia Grant, FBI Tactical Unit. And you just committed a federal offense by pointing a loaded weapon at me." And before Frank could bluster further, Alicia tapped the phone on her hip, sending a coded signal. And within minutes, the distant growl of black SUVs rolled into Maple Crest Estates, engines purring like thunderclouds arriving, doors flying open as armed federal agents in full tactical gear fanned out with the precision Frank had only pretended to wield. The sight shattered the last vestige of his bravado, his gun sagging as neighbors whispered, "He's finished." And an agent barked, "Weapon down," hands in the air. And Frank, cornered by the reality he had mocked, obeyed at last, dropping the pistol with a clatter on the asphalt as his knees seemed to soften under the weight of humiliation. The crowd of neighbors stood frozen as the black SUVs idled like growling beasts, headlights cutting sharp across manicured lawns, and agents in tactical gear closing on Frank Doyle with a swiftness that made his earlier bluster look like pantomime. One disarmed him, another snapped handcuffs around his wrists, and a metallic click echoed louder than his shouts ever had, silencing even the murmurs of onlookers. Alicia lowered her badge, her expression carved in calm authority, and addressed the gathering, her voice firm but steady. This man was never law enforcement. He abused the title, pulled a gun on an innocent person, and endangered every one of you standing here. Her words slicing through the disbelief of neighbors who had long tolerated his swagger as just Frank being Frank, but now shifted uncomfortably, some ashamed, some relieved to see his reign undone. Frank stammered, trying to salvage the scraps of his authority, spitting, "Why, you can't do this. I'm security chief. Here, they gave me this vest." And Alicia stepped closer, her gaze locking him in place even as agents held him. That vest is a costume, and you let it trick you into thinking you were above the law. Today you learn that law does not bow to arrogance, and Frank's shoulders sagged, his eyes darting to board members gathering behind the crowd, their faces pale, mouths pressed in as neighbors turned accusing stares on them, whispering how they had armed a bully and called him protector. Alicia pivoted to the crowd, sweeping her eyes across the faces, not unkind but unyielding. Real safety comes from respect, not intimidation. No community should fear the people meant to look after it. And the words landed with thrum of truth, some spectators clapping softly, others nodding, the tide of opinion turning against the small empire Frank thought he owned. Later, in the courtroom, Judge Harper looked down at Frank Doyle, stripped of his vest and swagger, his voice trembling as he tried to explain away his actions, but the judge cut him short. "You aimed a weapon at a federal commander. You did not just break a law. You broke the trust of every neighbor who believed your authority was real." And the gavel struck like a final nail sealing arrogance into its coffin. When it was over, Alicia walked with her aunt out of the courthouse steps into the sunlight, her aunt gripping her hand tightly, whispering, "Baby, you showed them what true strength looks like." And Alicia only nodded, her badge tucked away once more, her voice quiet as she told her, "Respect isn't something we demand, it's something we live." And as they walked back toward the waiting SUV, neighbors parted like a tide, eyes following her not with suspicion but with newfound respect. The story already spreading like wildfire through the neighborhood that would never again see Frank Doyle as an enforcer, but remember forever the day he pointed a gun at the wrong woman and learned that real authority doesn't come from a vest, a patch, or a loud voice. It comes from honor, restraint, and the power to stand unshaken when arrogance pulls a trigger.